They say desperation makes you blind. Maybe that's why I answered the ad. Caretaker needed, overnight, high pay, no experience necessary. It sounded like a scam, or worse, a setup. But when your rent's overdue and your cupboards echo, common sense becomes a luxury. I dialed the number without thinking twice. A woman answered after one ring. Her voice was soft, too soft, like it was being swallowed by static. "You're accepted," she said before I could even introduce myself. "Report at dusk, Black Hollow Asylum." Click. I stared at my phone, half expecting someone to jump out and yell prank, but no one did, and by 5 p.m. the next evening, I was driving down a winding forest road, one barely wide enough for my car. Black Hollow sat behind a rusted gate choked by ivy. It looked less like a building and more like something abandoned by time. The walls were sickly gray, with rotted balconies and windows like empty sockets. A storm was gathering overhead, painting the sky a dull iron hue. As I approached the entrance, a man stepped outside. Mid-50s, sunken eyes, jaw locked tight like it had forgotten how to smile. "Caretaker?" he asked. I nodded. He handed me a clipboard without making eye contact. "Sign this." The document had no header, no job description, just a short line of block text that read, "I acknowledge my duty. I will follow the protocol. I accept all consequences." I hesitated. "What consequences?" I asked. He looked up then, and for a brief second, I saw something in his eyes, something hollowed out, like the memory of a scream. "Just sign," he said. "If you want to leave before your shift ends, you'll need a key, and you don't get that until morning." So I signed. He led me inside through a side door that opened into a long corridor. No electricity, only emergency lamps that flickered red and dim like dying heartbeats. The air was thick with mildew and something worse, something metallic, like dried blood in old gauze. "Most of the asylum's sealed off," he explained as we walked. "You'll stay on the first floor. Patrol every hour. Stick to the marked halls. Don't open any doors unless they're already ajar." "Why?" I asked. He paused. "Because the ones that want out usually leave them open." I stopped walking. "I thought this place was abandoned." "It is," he replied, and walked away without another word. The caretaker office was a windowless room with an old desk, a drawer full of dusty maps, a walkie-talkie, and a broken clock stuck at 3:33. A bunk cot sat in the corner with sheets that hadn't been washed in years. There was also a laminated sheet taped to the wall, titled simply, "Night Protocol." It read, "Begin rounds at 12 a.m. sharp. Do not speak to anyone during rounds. If you hear crying, do not investigate. Avoid looking into patient room 42. If the lights flicker 3 times in succession, return to the caretaker office and wait until it stops. If you hear your name on the intercom, ignore it. Leave no earlier than 6 a.m. Never before." The final line, bolded and underlined, said, "The patients never left, but they remember who doesn't follow the rules." I stared at it for a long time, half laughing. It had to be a joke, right? Some leftover relic from when this place was still running, maybe used to scare interns or spook visitors. But the man hadn't laughed, and now I was alone. By 11:45 p.m., the wind had picked up outside and the silence inside was thicker than stone. Not even rats, not even creaks, just that suffocating silence, like the building was holding its breath. I checked my phone. No signal. The clock was still frozen at 3:33. Of course, midnight struck, and the intercom crackled. That was the first time I heard it. My name. Not yelled, not whispered, just said, "Calm." familiar. David. I froze. The intercom light wasn't even on. My skin went cold. I hadn't even started my patrol yet. I stood there for maybe a minute, staring at the intercom. It was dead. No lights, no hum, just a dull metal box mounted on a wall too old to remember color. Still, I heard it, my name, not muffled, not distorted, clear, like it had come from inside the room. I shook it off. Stress, paranoia, maybe even an old recorded loop that glitched. I grabbed the flashlight from the desk drawer and clipped the walkie to my belt. It had no signal light. I wasn't sure it even worked. Midnight. Time to begin the patrol. The hallway outside stretched into darkness like a throat. Every surface in the asylum felt damp, as if the building was sweating something out of its bones. I walked slowly, my boots thudding softly against the cracked linoleum. Each step echoed too long, like the sound had nowhere to go but back into itself. I followed the patrol map exactly as outlined. East Hall, nurse's station, then loop back to the dining corridor. Nothing unusual at first. Most of the rooms were locked, their doors rusted shut. A few were open just an inch, like the wind had nudged them. But there was no wind in here, and I sure as hell wasn't nudging anything. The first stop was the old recreation room. Empty wheelchairs, a piano with no keys, chairs arranged in a lazy circle around a rotted board game, the kind of setup where silence has memory. I turned to leave, and that's when I heard it. Shuffling, very faint, like sock feet dragging across tile. It came from behind a door labeled Ward D Storage, Keep Locked. I froze. That door wasn't on the patrol map, and it was open about 2 inches. I leaned closer, heart pounding, listening. The sound stopped, and then tap, 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 3 slow knocks from the inside. I took a shaky breath. Then I remembered the protocol. Do not open any doors unless they're already ajar. It was, just barely. I stepped back. The flashlight flickered. Tap, tap, tap. The knocks were faster this time. I turned and walked quickly back down the hallway. Not running, not yet. Just fast enough to say I wasn't curious anymore. By the time I reached the nurse's station, my hands were slick with sweat. The station was behind a glass window, shattered in the corner like someone had tried to crawl through it once. Old clipboards, plastic cups, paperwork yellowed and curled. I swept the flashlight across the room. And then I saw it. Room 42. I didn't even need to check the number. Something about it pulled at me like a magnet made of dread. The door was closed, tight, but someone, or something, was standing behind it. I saw the shadow under the door, 2 feet, bare, pale, facing outwardly, motionless. I blinked. Gone. I felt my spine crawl as I backed away. Rule number 4 burned in my memory. Avoid looking into patient room 42. I hadn't looked inside, but it had looked at me. The walkie on my belt crackled suddenly, breaking the silence. Then it spoke. Not static, not interference. A voice. David. That same damn voice. Calm. Familiar. Too familiar. My father's voice. I stood frozen in place. He died 6 years ago. Brain aneurysm. We hadn't spoken in 2 months before he passed. Now he was calling my name from a broken radio in a rotting asylum. David, you need to help me. You need to open the door. I yanked the walkie off and switched it off, hands shaking. That's when the lights flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. Protocol Rule 5. If the lights flicker 3 times in succession, return to the caretaker office and wait until it stops. I turned immediately and headed back. The hallway felt longer now, wrong somehow. Doors I didn't remember had appeared. One even looked newer, like it didn't belong to the building. I kept walking, ignoring everything but the end of the corridor where the caretaker's door should be. But it wasn't there, just a wall. Then, the intercom behind me crackled to life again, and my father's voice whispered one last time. "You took the job, son. That means you're family now." I stood there, staring at the blank wall where the caretaker's office should have been. There was no mistake. I had followed the same path, same turns, same broken vending machine in the corner. But now, just concrete, peeling paint, and a crooked wall sconce flickering like it was short-circuiting. It wasn't just gone. It had never been there. The lights continued to flicker overhead, not in patterns now, but in long, stuttering pulses like a dying heartbeat. The hallway seemed to swell with each flicker, like the walls themselves were breathing, expanding, contracting, waiting. I turned slowly, trying to decide whether to run or scream, when something caught my eye. Just a few feet away, to the left of where the office should have been, was a door. Fresh white paint, brass knob, no scratches, no dust. Too clean, not part of the building. It hadn't been there before. On the door was a plaque, handwritten in delicate cursive. Patient room 42, temporary holding. My blood turned to ice. Room 42 wasn't in this hallway. It was back near the nurse's station. I passed it less than 20 minutes ago. The door had been shut, tight, and now here it was again. Wrong place, new paint, and the worst part? The door was open, just an inch. I didn't breathe, I didn't blink. I stared at the crack, waiting for movement, a sound, anything. But there was only silence. Not peaceful silence. No, this was that charged, oppressive kind that feels like something is holding its breath right alongside you. I backed away, slow and careful. Then I heard it. From the crack in the door, a sound rolled out. Not a voice, not a whisper. Laughter, low, wet, not human. I turned and ran. I didn't care about the rules anymore. I didn't care about sticking to the map. I needed to get out. I needed to find the front doors. But the halls had changed. Every turn led back to another hallway that looked identical to the last. Same wall stains, same shattered lights. I passed a gurney flipped on its side at least 4 times, each time in a different corridor. That's when I noticed the patients. Not moving, not breathing, just standing, motionless in doorways, in corners, behind glass. Their faces were pale, eyes cloudy and vacant. Some wore faded hospital gowns. Others had restraints around their wrists or necks. They didn't look at me, not directly, but every time I passed one I felt it. Their heads would turn just slightly, only when I wasn't looking. A tilt here, a lean there, like they were tracking me in slow motion. I turned a sharp corner and came face to face with one of them. He was standing in the middle of the hallway, tall and emaciated, his skin stretched tight over bones like wax left in the sun. His mouth hung open slightly, as if in mid-sentence. His eyes, there were no pupils, just a soft, sickly gray film. "Can I help you?" I asked before I could stop myself. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then he raised one long, trembling finger and pointed. Behind me. I didn't turn. I didn't want to see what was there. Instead, I backed away, slow and careful, until I could duck through the nearest open door and slam it shut behind me. I was in what looked like an old therapy room. Torn leather chairs, overturned tables, and a cracked chalkboard with words half erased. "We don't treat the symptoms here, we treat the truth." I collapsed into one of the chairs, chest heaving. My flashlight was dim now, the battery dying. The walkie had gone completely silent. My only companions were the buzzing of a dying light bulb overhead and the distant mechanical whine of the intercom system restarting. Then the room began to hum. Low at first, barely audible, then louder, a mechanical tone rising in pitch like a tuning fork dragged across metal. From the hallway came footsteps, bare feet slapping slowly against tile. I pressed my back against the far wall, heart racing, breath shallow. Through the frosted glass of the therapy room door, I saw a shape stop outside, a silhouette. Then the doorknob began to turn, slowly, with purpose, and from the other side, a voice called softly, not my father's this time. It was me, calling myself. "David, open the door. You need to see." The doorknob kept turning. Click, click, click. It wasn't frantic. No pounding, no force. Just slow, deliberate movements, like whoever or whatever was out there was giving me time to change my mind. "David," the voice repeated, "you need to see. You left something behind." It was my voice, not similar, not close, mine. The cadence, the pitch, the subtle rasp I get when I'm tired, exactly how I sounded when I left that voicemail to my brother last week, except I never told anyone I took this job. No one knew I was here. I backed farther into the room, bumping into a table that scraped loudly against the tile. The sound echoed, sharp and sudden, and for a moment the doorknob stilled. Then came the whispering. Dozens of voices, overlapping, bleeding into each other like static. I couldn't make out any words, just the tone, hungry, urgent, almost grateful. I looked around the room, desperate for another exit, a vent, anything. But the only way out was the door, the one with a version of myself whispering behind it. And then the humming started again, from the chalkboard. At first, I thought it was just the buzzing light overhead. But no, the board itself was vibrating. Letters began etching themselves onto the dusty surface, slowly, one by one, like an invisible hand was scrawling a message. Rule 8. If you see yourself in a place you shouldn't be, run. That was new. There were only 7 rules on the wall in the caretaker's office, but that office didn't exist anymore. The whispering stopped. A new sound replaced it, a low creak like wood under pressure. I looked toward the door. It was open now, just enough to see a sliver of the hallway, and standing just beyond it was me. He wasn't mimicking me anymore. He was staring directly into the room, dead-eyed. His head tilted slightly, the way I do when I'm confused. Same clothes, same shoes, same tired face. But the skin was off, pale, grayish, like he'd been standing under fluorescent lights for too long. And his mouth, it was twitching, like he was trying to smile but forgot how. "Come on, man," he said softly. "You're already inside. You might as well finish the round." I didn't respond. My hands were clenched so tightly the flashlight was cracking. He took one step forward. "Don't you remember what the old man said?" he asked. "You don't get to leave early." Another step. I backed up until I hit the wall. "You think you're different," he said, voice calm, "but we've all been here before. You're just the next one." Then something inside me snapped. I lunged for the chair I'd been sitting on and hurled it toward the door. It smashed against the frame with a deafening crack, and the moment the noise hit, the hallway outside blinked. Literally blinked. For a second, it was gone. Just black void. And in that second, he vanished too. Gone. I didn't wait, I ran. The halls were worse now. Not longer, not twisting, just broken. Parts of the ceiling had collapsed. Water pooled in strange places, reflecting lights that weren't there. Rooms shifted when I passed. Once, A janitor's closet morphed into a patient's ward mid-step. I caught a glimpse of dozens of beds, all occupied. Every single patient was sitting up, facing me. But I didn't stop. The front lobby was supposed to be past the west corridor. At least, that's what the map said. But when I got there, it was something else entirely. A massive room, round and windowless, filled with mirrors. Every wall, every inch, mirrored. At first, I thought I was alone. But then the reflections moved without me. There were dozens of me, each one doing something different. Some standing still, some walking toward the glass. One version had blood dripping down his face. Another held his hands up like he was trapped behind the mirror. But one stood perfectly still. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stared back, eyes hollow, lips slowly curling into a grin. And in that moment, I understood what the patients were. They weren't patients anymore. They were copies, remnants, echoes of every caretaker who had taken the job and broken a rule. We were the staff now, just distorted, replayed, watching for the next fool who thought he'd make it out. I staggered out of the mirror room, barely aware of my feet beneath me. The hallway beyond was wrong again, longer than it had any right to be, stretching impossibly far in both directions. There were doors on either side now, dozens of them, identical except for the faint, flickering red numbers above each one. They were all counting down. Every door had a different number: 211, 148, 333. And as I passed one marked 000, it swung open on its own. Inside was darkness, and from within that darkness, I heard footsteps, running. I turned and bolted, tearing through the hallway as the doors began to rattle around me. Some swinging open, others slamming shut, the countdowns blurring into nonsense. My lungs burned and my flashlight died mid-sprint, leaving me alone in a storm of shadows and shrieking hinges. Finally, I burst into a stairwell. The air shifted. It was cooler here, denser, like the atmosphere was thicker somehow. I slammed the metal door shut behind me and leaned against the railing, chest heaving. Paint was peeling off the concrete walls in long strips. Rust covered every step. The number B1 was spray painted near the stairhead in crude red strokes. Basement. I had no idea how I got here. This level wasn't on the map. But as I looked up the stairwell to the next level, the number painted there made my blood freeze. Caretaker exit, 6 a.m. only. Rule 7, leave no earlier than 6 a.m. Never before. I checked my watch, 3:27 a.m., too early, still trapped. I began descending instead, my boots clanging against the metal steps, echoing into the darkness below. There were no lights, just the faint glow of something pulsing at the bottom, a soft blue shimmer like moonlight underwater. As I reached the bottom landing, I realized the walls had changed again, no longer concrete. Now they were lined with tile, sterile, white, but smeared with streaks of something brown and flaking. Mold? Blood? There were no doors here, just one long corridor that ended in a vault-like chamber. The door was massive, iron with a round hatch in the middle and rusted bolts the size of fists. It looked like it belonged in a fallout shelter, and it was pulsing. The light came from thin cracks running along its edge, like the seams couldn't contain whatever was behind it. There was something carved into the door in uneven lettering, gouged deep with something sharp. "Do not open. They lie." I stared at it, trying to make sense of it all, when the walkie clipped to my belt came alive again. I hadn't touched it in hours. I thought it was broken. This time, there was no familiar voice, no father, no echo of myself, just one message. repeating, glitched, warped. Rule number 1 was never for you. Rule number 1 was never for you. Rule number 1. It looped louder each time. Rule number 1, stay in your car between midnight and 3:33 a.m. Do not leave for any reason. Lock the doors. I thought that rule was stupid. I wasn't in a car. I was walking hallways patrolling like they asked, like they needed. But I realize now, the rule wasn't meant to keep me safe. It was meant to keep something else from seeing me, because I wasn't the only thing awake between midnight and 3:33, and whatever was behind that vault door, it knew I had broken the first rule. I took a step backward, heart hammering. The door groaned, the bolts shook. I turned and ran. I didn't know where I was going. Up the stairs, down the wrong halls. I passed corridors that folded in on themselves, turned corners into black voids. The asylum wasn't even pretending to be a building anymore. It was a maze, a trap, a body, and I was the infection it meant to digest. Eventually, I found myself back in the caretaker's office. Only, it wasn't how I remembered it. It was untouched, clean, fresh paper on the desk, lights working perfectly, and on the wall the rules were printed again, clean and bold, like new, except now there were 9. 8 read, "If the vault begins to open, it's already too late," and 9 scratched in by hand beneath the others. "You're the key." The caretaker's office was perfect, spotless, fresh sheets folded neatly on a cot, a full logbook on the desk, pages unmarked. A coffee mug, still warm, sat by the monitor that hadn't worked since I'd arrived. The clock above the door ticked softly. 3:33 a.m. Exactly. I stood frozen, afraid to blink. The room was identical, but it wasn't the one I'd been in earlier tonight. That office had peeling paint, dead air, and a broken clock. This question mark. This was like stepping into a memory of the office, someone else's memory. And then I saw it. The mirror. It hadn't been there before, not on the wall beside the desk. But now, there it was. A narrow, vertical strip of glass framed in old brass. My reflection stood stiff, gaunt, eyes wide and ringed with shadows. But it wasn't just a reflection. It was watching me. Not mirroring me. Watching, and then it moved. I didn't. The reflection tilted its head slowly, that awful, off-center lean I'd seen on the figures in the hall. Its mouth stretched into a grin, not mocking, not amused, grateful. It reached toward the edge of the glass from its side, tapped, once, twice, then mouthed the words, "Thank you." The light bulb above me popped. The door behind me slammed open, and the hallway beyond was gone, replaced with that spiraling, impossible corridor again. Walls that stretched and contracted, doors numbered wrong, whispers now constant, like breath on the back of my neck. I stumbled back into the office and slammed the door shut, but the walkie hissed again. This time, it wasn't words, it was weeping, then laughter, then silence, and then a new voice, calm, smooth, tired, the man who hired me. "You lasted longer than most," he said, "but the rules aren't meant to be followed. They're meant to make you break them. It needs one of us to open the vault eventually." I shouted into the walkie, voice cracking, "What the hell is in the vault?" The man chuckled. "The ones who were left behind. And the ones we tried to forget. The patients, they weren't sick, not in the way you think." A pause. "They were kept here, contained. And now, thanks to you, they remember the way out. The vault, the whispers, the countdowns. It was never about keeping me alive. It was about keeping them asleep." I grabbed the rule sheet off the wall, desperate for a way to undo it, but something had changed again. There was only one line now, black ink, freshly written, still wet. Clock out. That's it. No rules, no protocol, just clock out. I turned to the desk. The logbook was open, pen ready. The line for my name was already filled out, and below it, the time, 6 a.m. But the clock still read 3:33. Stuck, waiting. I realized then I'd never make it to 6 a.m. because the asylum wasn't counting time anymore. It was counting on me, and I had reached the end of the list. The whispers behind the door turned into chanting now. Low, rhythmic. The language made no sense, but I understood the feeling behind it. They were calling to me, not to kill me, not to haunt me, to keep me. I stepped back, heart racing, then turned and smashed the mirror with the flashlight. It didn't shatter. Instead, it rippled. And from inside, my reflection stepped forward. He looked whole, calm, rested, as if he had finally gotten sleep after years of torment. He reached out with one hand, pressed it to the glass. The surface cracked, a spider web of light, and just before it broke, he whispered what I already knew. You were always the replacement. Then everything went white. I woke up in the caretaker's office, clean, bright, the smell of fresh paper and antiseptic in the air. A man was standing in front of me, mid-50s, sunken eyes, familiar jawline, tired. He held a clipboard out to me. Caretaker? He asked. I nodded before I knew why. He handed me a sheet of paper, blank at first, until words etched themselves across the top. I acknowledge my duty. I will follow the protocol. I accept all consequences. And just below that, rule number 1, stay in your car between midnight and 3:33 a.m. Do not leave for any reason. Lock the doors. I signed, because I always do, because we all do, because the patients never left. And now, neither do I.